Well, this is pretty exciting news. Somebody at Bluepoint or Sony or PlayStation, somebody there has leaked screenshots from the canceled God of War live service game. That's a hell of a little Sunday surprise. I like it. Now, I had hoped we'd see actual gameplay when this stuff inevitably leaked, which it usually does. Inevitably usually is contradicting it. It leaked. I was hoping for gameplay. We don't get gameplay, we just get environments. But maybe this is the beginning of a rollout of leakage where we're going to get to actually see what the gameplay was. And I will tell you, when I first saw the tweet today, I think MP First was the one to drop this news. I thought we were going to see Kratos, and it looked like it was old school Kratos, but in super high def. And I'm like, oh my God, this would have been so cool. You know, maybe not so much. I mean, that may be coming. I hope that's coming. Whether it's the Egypt 2.5D game that's rumored, which hopefully would be old school Kratos, or a remake of God of War with the first three, or a brand new adventure with Kratos without the beard and he's not so grumpy all the time. I mean, he's angry. There's a difference between anger and grump, but at least we got something. At least we got something. We got ourselves a little treat, a little Halloween treat, because what you see behind me are the environments that do look pretty Greeky, which is pretty cool. And obviously this leak leads to a lot of speculation. That's what we're going to talk about in this video. What this game could have been, why it may very well have been canceled, and what Bluepoint might very well be working on now. And maybe it has to do with God of War. Now, you gotta be aware, this is all speculation. I have nothing to do with God of War anymore. So these are all just guesses. Now, all we gotta do is wait for the sign. There it is. Ooh, let's begin. Okay, so if you look at the size of the spaces in these images that have leaked from the game, and you look at some of the potentially interactive parts that appear in these images, and you remind yourself that Sony has said this was going to be a service-based game, which doesn't mean it has to have been multiplayer, but I can't think of any service-based games really that aren't, or at least not at the scope that these images suggest this game was going to have. You take all that into account, and Bluepoint's God of War service game was shaping up to be one of two things. Number one, a continuation of the much-loved God of War Ascension multiplayer, which in essence was Kratos meets Power Stone. Now, Ascension was not that big of a hit, but even to this day, there are people who swear by and love and remember very fondly and still play to this day the Ascension multiplayer. And looking at some of these screenshots, it suggests that God of War meets Power Stone may very well have been where they were headed. I mean, these look like weapon racks, right? That you can maybe grab weapons off of and use. These, I don't know what these are, but they kind of seem like pits that you could throw your enemy into, like environment damage. There's also a lot of space to play in. Now, again, whether this was 4-player or a 100-man battle royale, melee games like God of War tend to struggle if the camera's not pulled back too far, because you don't know who's coming up from behind, right? So you're going to want to have an environment that's big and empty enough that the camera can pull back and you can see your spatial awareness and what the enemy's doing and who's approaching and all that stuff. That also tracks with this kind of Power Stone God of War Ascension multiplayer design. Now, if you remember, if you played it in Ascension multiplayer, there was a mode called Favor of the Gods, and it was basically deathmatch, team versus team. So with that in mind, check out this pretty interesting screenshot that leaked with the other screenshots today from God of War. Clearly, levels were being designed to have kind of a cursed version and a pristine version, which, again, there's no guarantee, but it kind of makes sense to say that each team was fighting, like maybe it was gods versus monsters or heroes versus monsters, and you had boons that you got from the gods, like in Hades or whatever, and each team was fighting to either bring this corruption and cursed state to the world or the pristine kind of heroic state to the world. And depending on how well each team was doing, the level was literally in real time shifting between kind of the cursed version, which is the bad guys winning, and the good version, which is the good guys winning. You can definitely see a Favor of the Gods style game working with this new mechanic. That's what I would do, or certainly that's what I think of when I see this and I think about what this game probably was. Now, there was another mode in God of War Ascension multiplayer that could have been the inspiration for what we're looking at here, and that was basically co-op horde mode, but with God of War. Makes a lot of sense they go down that road as well to some extent, where you and your buddies have teamed up and you are upgrading and leveling up in order to advance through the various monster levels. Certainly we see that in Microsoft's Towerborn that's coming out soon. We see that in the just launched Absalom that people are loving. Whether there's a rogue element or not, TBD, but I could absolutely see that kind of game being an influence over what we're looking at here. But now remember, with those kinds of games, Absalom, Towerborn, there's not a lot there, at least on launch. It's just monster closet after monster closet, and your rogue element or your ability to keep adding monsters and new gimmicks has got to be very, very robust in order to keep that thing alive for more than a couple of weeks after it launches. Now, I mean, certainly after the clear failure of Last of Us Factions, they're not going into this blind. If they were going to make that kind of game, they would be planning for how much time and money is it going to take, if we're doing PvE as the core, to have new levels and puzzles and all the narrative things that God of War fans would demand in a game like this. They're not going to be okay with a God of War skin over a Towerborn. And maybe that's what they kind of came to discover if they were going down this road. But you could, I mean, it's a great fantasy to go, let's make a 4-player PvE game, and it's basically a God of War game, but it's a service game, and we have enough resources and ability that every couple of months we're releasing brand new multiplayer adventures. I mean, look, man, that's pretty pie in the sky. But hell, the only game that's even come close to that is Warframe. And even that, there's a lot of modularity there that I think God of War fans would push back on. So between these two, my guess is they were focused mostly on the God of War Power Stone. They could have been trying to do both, but I wouldn't have advised it. Whatever kind of design they were working on for this, there could have been so many different reasons that this game was canceled. I hope we get to know ultimately what it was. It could have been the money. They just didn't recognize how much they'd have to keep spending in order to keep adding stuff. Maybe it was that. Or maybe they just recognized we don't really want to do this. And Sony has seen what it's like when teams are making service games when that's really not their bread and butter and their passion. And maybe Sony was like, we haven't spent that much yet and we don't want to harm the IP. Let's put these guys on a God of War remake, or let's put these guys on, because that's what they're hiring for right now, is some kind of third-person action adventure. The last thing I'll say about this is, if it was canceled, because let's say it was Power Stone meets God of War. Let's say it was canceled not because it wasn't a blast, not because it wasn't just so much fun, but because Sony had miscalculated how much they would have to spend in order to keep fans coming back to the table after that first bite. But if God of War meets Power Stone, or if God of War meets Towerborn was actually a great deal of fun and they killed it because they couldn't make a long-tail, long-term business model work, it kind of starts to sound like the same reason they killed Last of Us Factions, which is it was a blast to play, but they didn't plan for the long term. Okay, well, at this point, Sony, if that's true, now again, I'm getting mad. I'm just saying that if that's true, it sucks because you don't have to publish it, but have the video game group do what y'all did with K-pop Demon Hunters. Sony Animation made it, they were going to release it, and then they said that's not for us anymore, and Netflix went off, and, the rest is history. But in the case of, a God of War or a Last of Us, okay, there are plenty of companies out there that would like to publish a game that might only have a lifespan of like 4 or 5 months, and it's not going to run forever, and it's not going to make them $1 trillion, but it's still a really fucking good game, and players want it. I hope that is not what we're looking at again. Hopefully we'll see more footage of this, and hopefully we will see what Bluepoint is working on very, very soon. I would love to think it's God of War, whether they're doing the 2.5D Egypt version that is heavily rumored, whether they are remaking the God of War 1 through 3 for PS5 and onward, like a remaster/remake, which I would love. I think it would be very cool if all 3 games just linked together seamlessly and there was no 1, 2, and 3. It just was this sort of new version of the game that told the whole story in one big fucking bite of the apple. Let me know in the comments. Would you prefer, I'm curious actually, would you prefer Bluepoint make a God of War 1 through 3 remaster or a Bloodborne remaster? There you go. I hope you're well. I hope you're safe. Hope you're having fun playing some great games. Hey, while you're here, consider a subscription, a membership, sharing the video, telling your friends, hitting the notification bell, hitting us up on the Patreon with support, or hitting us up here on a YouTube membership. Every bit helps keep this channel rolling. We sure do appreciate it. Regardless, though, seriously, hope you're doing well. I'll see you soon.